the sound you're hearing right now. That low, building roar, the kind that vibrates in your chest before it ever reaches your ears. That's a Gulfstream G700 pushing 43,000 pounds of thrust against the morning air. I know that sound the way some people know their mother's voice. I grew up with it. And on the morning that changed everything, as I sat in the cream leather captain's chair of tail number N118 Whitmore, watching the runway lights blur into a single golden line beneath me, I thought about Gate 12. I thought about Mark. I thought about the look on his face when he turned away from me in that terminal. The easy dismissal, the casual cruelty of a man who had spent 2 years believing he understood exactly who I was. He thought he left me behind at Gate 12 with a broken heart and a cheap suitcase. He didn't realize I was the one who signed the lease for the entire airport. My name is Claire Whitmore, and this is the story of the day I stopped pretending to be small. Let me take you back before any of this. Before the jet, before the confrontation, before the moment my carefully constructed ordinary life finally came apart at the seams. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand who I was pretending to be and why, before you can understand what I chose to become. I was 26 years old the first time I walked into a hardware store in Columbus, Ohio, wearing a plain denim jacket and a ponytail, and I was 26 years old the first time I lied to someone I would eventually love. The lie wasn't dramatic. It didn't have to be. A man with sawdust on his forearms and an easy smile asked me if I knew anything about load-bearing walls, and I said I was just looking for paint samples. He laughed. I laughed. We talked for 45 minutes about the renovation project he was supposedly managing for a client, and somewhere in those 45 minutes, a version of me that had nothing to do with Whitmore Aviation, or the family name, or the Forbes profile my father kept trying to stop journalists from publishing. That version of me took a breath and decided to stay a while. His name was Mark Calloway. And from the very first conversation, I chose not to correct the story he was building in his head about me. He saw a girl in a denim jacket, a girl who drove a sensible Honda Civic, which I had specifically rented for that weekend, a detail I still feel a complicated kind of shame about. He saw a girl who ordered the mid-range wine at dinner, who split the check without making it awkward, who talked about her family in the careful, vague way people do when they come from ordinary places. He didn't see the Gulfstream. He didn't see the estate in Connecticut, or the penthouse in Manhattan, or the Whitmore name carved into the wing of a children's hospital. He didn't see any of it, because I didn't show him any of it. I want you to understand something before you judge me for that. I want you to understand what it is to grow up the way I grew up. My father, Richard Whitmore, built Whitmore Aviation from a single Cessna and a borrowed hangar in 1987. By the time I was born, there were 43 aircraft in the fleet. By the time I turned 18, we had contracts with 7 Fortune 500 companies, 3 foreign heads of state, and a celebrity clientele my father referred to simply as the Tuesday regulars. By the time I was 26 and standing in that hardware store, Whitmore Aviation was valued at somewhere north of $2 billion, and I was the sole heir to every cent of it. You'd think that would feel like winning. It doesn't always. What it actually feels like from the inside is a glass wall. You can see everyone clearly, You can watch the way people interact, the warmth of it, the ease of it, the way friends lean into each other at a bar without calculating who's picking up the tab or what they want from you in return. You can see all of it. You just can't quite touch it. Because money, real money, the kind that gets written about and whispered about, and that makes strangers' eyes go a certain specific way when they finally figure it out. That kind of money changes every room you walk into. It changes what people say. It changes what they don't say. It changes the way they look at you. The slightly too bright smile, the careful laugh, the invisible calculation running behind their eyes. I had been living behind that glass wall my entire life. And then I met Mark Calloway in a hardware store, and he didn't know my last name. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was just a girl talking to a boy about paint colors. I held on to that feeling like it was something fragile, which, as it turns out, it was. Our first official date was at an Italian place in German Village, the kind of restaurant with mismatched chairs and candles stuck into wine bottles, the kind of place with exactly the right amount of comfortable shabbiness. Mark was charming in the specific way of men who've been told their whole lives that they're charming. He had good hair, broad shoulders, and a way of listening that made you feel, at least in the early days, like you were the most interesting person he'd encountered in years. He told me about his family over that first dinner. The Calloways. Old Ohio money, he said, with the practiced ease of someone who had said it many times before. His father had been in real estate, his grandfather in banking. They had a house in Indian Hill, the proper part, he specified, and I noted the specification, and they summered on Lake Erie. He described his upbringing with the particular confidence of someone who equates their childhood zip code with their worth as a human being. I smiled and told him I was from a small town outside Columbus. My dad worked in aviation, I said, which was technically true, in the same way that saying, the Pope works in religion is technically true. He didn't ask many follow-up questions. That should have told me something. But I was 26 and quietly lonely in a way I had never been able to explain to anyone. And he was warm and present and uncomplicated. And the restaurant smelled like garlic and old wood. And I let myself have it. I let myself have him. In the months that followed, I became very good at performing ordinary. I had practice, actually, years of it. My college years at a state school rather than the Ivy League, my parents could have easily bought my way into. The years I'd spent in a small apartment in Columbus, doing consulting work that had nothing to do with the family business. All of it was practice. I knew how to dress down. I knew how to talk about budgets and grocery bills and the price of gas without it sounding like research. I had become, over the years, fluent in a life I wasn't actually living. With Mark, I simply kept speaking that language. We split dinner checks. We took turns driving. When he suggested a weekend trip to a state park, I packed a bag from a mid-range outdoor retailer and said nothing about the private cabin my family owned 4 hours away. When his apartment's hot water heater broke, I helped him look up repair estimates on his laptop, while my property manager in Manhattan was simultaneously fielding calls about a commercial building we'd just acquired. I maintained the fiction. Carefully, deliberately, because I wanted to know. I wanted to know if Mark Calloway could love the girl in the denim jacket, the real one underneath all the money, The one who still got nervous in crowds, who cried at documentary films, who kept a journal she'd never let anyone read. I wanted to know what it felt like to be chosen simply, plainly, without the weight of what I was worth. And for a while, I want to be honest with you, because this story doesn't deserve shortcuts. For a while, it felt like maybe he could. He remembered things in those early months. He showed up. He called when he said he would call. On my 27th birthday, he drove 40 minutes in a snowstorm to bring me soup when I had a cold, and he sat on the end of my couch and watched old movies with me until I fell asleep. And when I woke up, he'd washed the bowl and left a note on my kitchen counter that said simply, "Feeling better is mandatory." I kept that note. I don't know exactly when things began to shift. That's the insidious thing about slow erosion. You don't feel each individual wave. You only notice one day that the shoreline looks completely different from what you remember. The first cracks appeared, I think, when Mark's family finances began to buckle under the weight of their own performance. See, here's what I pieced together over 2 years of quiet observation. The Calloway family money, the old Ohio money, the Indian Hill house, the Lake Erie summers, was not what it appeared to be. The house was mortgaged 3 times over. The grandfather's banking fortune had been largely liquidated by Mark's father in a series of investments that I can only describe as catastrophically optimistic. Mark himself had credit card debt in 6 figures. His car was leased. His Rolex, the one he wore to every social occasion with the casual confidence of a man who'd inherited it, had been purchased 18 months ago on a payment plan. I knew all of this not because Mark told me, but because Mark eventually needed help. It started small. A dinner here, a weekend trip there. He was always charming about it, always framed it as a temporary inconvenience, a cash flow thing, an investment thing, something sophisticated and adult, and nothing to worry about. He'd pay me back. He always said he'd pay me back. He never paid me back. And I never asked him to, because by that point, I had built the fiction so carefully, maintained it so consistently, that extracting myself from it, telling him the truth, the real truth, felt like it would destroy everything. Or maybe I just didn't want to see his face change when he found out. Maybe I wasn't ready to watch the warm, uncomplicated version of him get replaced by whatever he would become when he learned my last name. So I subsidized him quietly. I paid for things in ways that didn't look like paying for things. I covered restaurant bills with cards I told him were old accounts I barely use. When his car needed a transmission repair that cost $4,000, I mentioned a freelance project that had just paid out and wrote him a check. When the Calloway family was at risk of losing the Indian Hill house, a situation Mark described to me in a rare moment of genuine vulnerability, his voice tight and his hands unsteady, I made a series of phone calls I told him were about some family investment stuff, and quietly arranged for the mortgage to be restructured through a shell company he would never recognize. The house was saved. Mark never knew how. His mother, Patricia Calloway, called it a miracle of the market. She said this at a dinner table where she'd been making subtle digs at me for approximately 18 months. Patricia Calloway was a particular kind of woman, the kind whose entire identity is constructed around the idea that she married well and descended from people who married even better. She was impeccably dressed in the way of someone who buys expensive things on sale and then removes the tags before anyone can see them. She called me Claire, dear, in a tone that managed to make my own name sound like a mild disappointment. She asked about my family with the specific interest of someone running a background check in real time. "Your father is in aviation, you said?" she asked once, swirling her wine. "Mm-hmm," I said. "Small operation." She lost interest almost immediately. Mark's friends were worse, in a different way. They were loud where Patricia was cutting. They made their judgments at volume. There were 4 of them who formed the inner circle: Tate, Brandon, Chaser, and Davis. And they had known Mark since prep school and treated their shared history like a form of currency, spending it constantly, loudly, in front of anyone who would listen. They called me the Ohio girl, not to my face exactly, but in that specific way where it was said just loudly enough, just casually enough, that you were meant to hear it and understand it as a characterization rather than an insult, as if where I came from was itself a kind of evidence. Evidence of what, exactly, I was never entirely sure. "She's sweet," I overheard Tate say once at a rooftop party in Columbus, while I was standing 10 feet away. "She's just not exactly, you know." Mark's usual. Mark's usual had apparently included a girl named Annalise, whose family had a vineyard in Napa, and another named Courtney, who'd gone to Dartmouth and worked in private equity. I was, by comparison, sweet. I smiled at Tate when he came over to refill his drink. I asked him about his job. He was, at that point, employed by a firm that had been quietly struggling for 2 years and would eventually lay him off entirely. A fact I knew because the firm in question had approached Whitmore Aviation about a potential partnership 6 months earlier. I said nothing about it. I was very good at saying nothing. The engagement happened on a Tuesday evening in March, 14 months after that first dinner in German Village. We were on the rooftop of what Mark believed was a random boutique hotel he'd found online. I had, in fact, quietly arranged the entire evening through a contact who managed the property, made a call, covered the cost, ensured the details were right. He proposed with a ring I could tell he'd stretched to afford. A round-cut solitaire, beautiful in its simplicity, roughly a carat and a half. Probably cost him 3 months of his actual take-home pay. I said yes before he finished the sentence. I meant it. Even then, even with all the complications and the quiet subsidies, and the slow erosion of things I was trying not to see, I meant it. Because in that moment, in the blue-gray light of a March evening with the city spread out below us, he looked at me like I was something worth choosing. And I was so hungry for that. So deeply and privately hungry for exactly that feeling, that I held on to it with both hands. I kept saying yes for 11 more months, while I arranged for his credit cards, the ones he'd maxed out and was barely servicing, to be quietly absorbed into accounts associated with a consulting firm I owned, while I covered the cost of the engagement party his mother insisted on at a venue that ran to $14,000, while I said nothing and smiled and performed ordinary, and told myself that at some point the right moment would come to tell him the truth. The right moment never came, but Gate 12 did. If you've ever loved someone more than they deserved and kept quiet about it because you were afraid the truth would cost you everything, this channel is for you. Subscribe. Hit the bell. We tell the stories that most people only dare to think. The bachelor trip came up the way most things came up with Mark and his friends. Loud, sudden, and presented as already decided. It was a Saturday morning in late October when he mentioned it. I was making coffee in the kitchen of the apartment I'd helped him furnish, and he came in still in his gym clothes, phone in hand, the particular energy of someone delivering news they're excited about. Las Vegas. 4 nights. His core group, plus a few others. 10 men total. They'd chartered a plane. They'd booked a suite at the Meridian, which was a new ultra-luxury resort that had opened on the Strip earlier that year, and had the kind of rates that required a strong commitment to not thinking about them. There would be VIP tables, bottle service, a private pool experience, a golf day. Sounds amazing, I said, and I meant it. When? He told me the dates. I mentally moved 3 things on my calendar. I was thinking, I said carefully, maybe I could fly out and meet you for the last day or 2. Not to crash anything, just we haven't had a trip in a while. He was already looking at his phone. We'll see, he said. We'll see. 2 weeks passed. The trip got closer. I asked again, gently, not wanting to be the fiancé who couldn't give her partner space, not wanting to confirm whatever quiet story Tate and Brandon were telling about the Ohio girl who didn't quite fit. It's a guy's thing, Mark said. You'd be bored. I wouldn't be bored. I know how to... Claire. His voice had an edge to it I'd been hearing more frequently in recent months. It's a bachelor trip. It's supposed to be just us. I let it go. What I didn't know, at that point, was that 2 other fiancés had been invited. Tate's girlfriend, Simone, and Brandon's wife, Chelsea, were both joining on the 3rd day. This was not a piece of information Mark volunteered. I found out from Chelsea, who texted me a week before the trip asking if I was excited about Vegas. I stared at that text for a long time. Then I typed back, "So excited. Can't wait." Then I put my phone face down on the counter and stood very still in my kitchen for approximately 4 minutes. I had 2 options in that moment. I could confront Mark directly and watch him navigate the particular dishonesty of a man caught in a small cruelty. Or I could say nothing and watch what happened at the airport. I chose to watch, because by then I think I already knew. Not everything, not the full extent of what that morning would become. But I knew enough. I knew there was a version of events unfolding that I needed to see clearly, without the distortion of his explanations. I needed to see what Mark Calloway did when he thought no one important was watching. The morning of the flight, I got up early. I dressed carefully. Not in the simple girl from Ohio wardrobe I'd cultivated for his benefit, but not in anything that would tip my hand either. Dark jeans, a cream-colored sweater, clean white sneakers. My hair down, my engagement ring on. I looked, if anything, like the most composed version of the character I'd been playing for 2 years. I packed a small carry-on, 1 bag. Mark was distracted all morning. His phone kept lighting up, the group chat presumably. He was charged with an energy that had nothing to do with me and didn't try to hide that fact. He kissed me on the cheek when I brought him coffee. He didn't notice what I was wearing. The drive to the airport was quiet. The Columbus airport in October has a particular quality to it. That flat Midwestern light, diffuse and gray, everything very practical and no nonsense. The kind of airport where people are mostly going somewhere useful rather than somewhere glamorous. I knew this airport. I had, as I mentioned, some professional familiarity with its operational structure. But I sat in the passenger seat of Mark's leased car and watched the terminals approach and said nothing. We parked. We went inside. And that's where the morning broke open. Tate was already there when we arrived, standing near the check-in area with Brandon and two other men I recognized from Mark's social circle. Davis was on the phone. Chaser was holding two massive paper cups of coffee. Chelsea was there too. Simone was there. Both of them with luggage. Both of them visibly, comfortably, clearly part of the group. I watched Mark's face when he saw them. Not a flicker of surprise, not a beat of miscalculation. He had known they were coming. Of course he had. He waved at Tate, bumped shoulders with Brandon, completely seamlessly integrated himself into the group. Then Tate looked at me, not warmly. "Oh," he said. Just that. "Oh, is Claire coming?" The way he said my name, like it was an administrative error. Mark's jaw tightened slightly. "No," he said. She drove me. I'm just going to let that land for a moment. She drove me. 11 months engaged. 2 years together. The woman whose money had been quietly holding his life together for the better part of those 2 years. Standing in a public airport terminal with a carry-on bag and an engagement ring. And he introduced her to his friends as the person who drove him. "Actually," I said quietly, "I was hoping to come along." The words fell into the group conversation like a stone into still water. Tate's expression didn't change. Brandon suddenly found something very interesting on his phone. Simone and Chelsea exchanged a look that I registered and filed away. Mark turned to face me fully. And this is the part I want you to really hear, because this is the part that mattered. This is the moment that I will remember when I am 80 years old, sitting somewhere warm and quiet, and someone asks me what changed everything. He looked at me with a kind of patient condescension that I had seen building in him for months. The specific look of someone who has been tolerating you and is tired of the effort. "Claire," he said. His voice was measured, deliberate. "There isn't a seat for you." "There's a commercial flight," I said. "I could book something." "It's a chartered flight," he said. "It's all ready." "I know about Chelsea and Simone," I said. A beat. Something moved through his eyes. Not guilt, exactly. More like recalculation. "That's different," he said. "How is it different?" And here is where Mark Calloway, the man I had said yes to on a rooftop in March, the man I had quietly built a financial safety net around for 2 years, chose to show me exactly who he was. He stepped slightly closer to me, not close enough to be intimate, close enough to lower his voice in the way that's meant to feel like discretion, but actually functions as dismissal. "Because this is a particular kind of trip," he said. "And frankly, Claire, you're not..." He paused, seemed to choose his words with a care that made them more cutting, not less. "This crowd, these plans, you'd be uncomfortable. You're not really used to this level of... You know. I stood completely still. "You should head home," he said. "Take a bus or, I don't know. There are taxis." He said this the way you say things that seem practical and are actually erasure. "I'll call you when we land." Then he turned back to his friends. Tate said something I couldn't quite hear. Two of the men laughed. Not loudly. The particular quiet laugh of people who believe they're in a private moment, not realizing, or not caring, that sound travels. I stood at the edge of that group with my carry-on bag and my engagement ring and 2 years of deliberate invisibility, and I watched Mark Calloway walk toward his gate. He looked back once. Not to check on me, not out of second thoughts. He looked back the way you glance back at something you've left behind in a parking lot, making sure it isn't going to be a problem. I wasn't going to be a problem. I was going to be something much more significant than that. I waited until the group had moved through the security line and out of sight. Then I found a quiet corner of the terminal, one of those gray, aspirational seating areas with outlets and bad coffee and a view of the runway. And I sat down, and I took out my phone, and I made 2 calls. The first was to my father. Richard Whitmore answered on the second ring. He always answered on the second ring. "Claire Bear," he said, which was what he'd called me since I was 4 years old. And despite everything, despite the fluorescent lights and the hard chair and the specific feeling of having just been publicly minimized by a man I'd loved, the sound of it made my eyes sting. "Dad," I said, "is tail number 7 available?" A pause. Not surprise. My father is not easily surprised, but a thoughtful pause. The kind of pause that meant he was reading the situation accurately. "It's in Columbus," he said, "fueled and available. I need a pilot and a flight plan to Las Vegas. McCarran, private terminal. Within the hour if possible." Another pause. "Claire," he said, "do you want to tell me what happened?" "Not yet," I said, "but I think I might want to tell you everything soon." "Okay," he said simply. My father has always understood that there are moments when love looks like not asking. "I'll call Captain Torres." "Thank you, Dad." "The suite at the Aria is..." "Not the Aria," I said. "The Meridian." The longest pause yet. "Claire," he said. "The Meridian. That's where..." "I know," I said. A beat. And then, and I will love my father for this until I take my last breath, he simply said, "I'll call Marcus." Marcus was our director of hospitality relations. Marcus had relationships with every general manager of every 5-star property on the Las Vegas Strip. Marcus was very, very good at his job. "Tell him I'll need the presidential suite," I said. "And I need him to pull up any reservations under the name Calloway or Whitmore Consulting Group. Those are the cards Mark's been using. And I need to understand the full picture." "Done," my father said. "Anything else?" "Yes," I said. "Can you have someone send a car? I want to drive to the private terminal." "Already on it," he said. 10 minutes. I hung up and sat for a moment in that gray terminal chair, looking out at the runway, where Mark's chartered plane was presumably taxiing toward its departure gate. I watched a regional jet push back from a jetway. I watched a ground crew move in practiced choreography across the tarmac, and then I made the second call. Diana Chen had been my executive assistant for 4 years. She was efficient, discreet, ferociously competent, and had been watching my relationship with Mark Calloway with a very specific kind of quiet concern that she expressed primarily through what she didn't say. "Good morning, Claire," she answered. "Good morning, Di. I need you to do a few things." "I'm ready." "Pull up all active credit accounts associated with Whitmore Consulting Group. Any secondary cardholders. I need a list." The sound of keystrokes. "Give me 60 seconds." I waited. Okay, she said. I have 11 secondary accounts. 3 are company cards for the Columbus operations team. 1 is the property account for the German Village building. 2 are corporate entertainment accounts. And then there are 5 that are, a slight pause, personal. Those 5, I said. Whose names are on them? She read them. Mark Calloway. Mark Calloway. MCK Enterprises, LLC. A shell company I recognized as something Mark had registered 18 months ago and done essentially nothing with. 2 more variation of his name, and the LLC. Combined balance? I said. She told me the number. I let out a slow breath through my nose. The number was significant. Not significant to me in any meaningful way. A rounding error in the context of a quarter's operating budget. But very significant in the context of Mark Calloway's actual financial circumstances. He had been carrying those cards like they were his own. He had been treating that credit line like inheritance. Suspend them, I said. Effective immediately. 0 balance notification to be sent to the associated phone number on file. A pause. Not reluctance. Di doesn't hesitate on my instructions. Just the careful pause of someone confirming the gravity of a decision before executing it. All 5? All 5. Done, she said. Anything else? Yes. Can you reach out to the concierge at the Meridian? I want to speak to the general manager directly. His name is James Kowalski, she said, because of course she knew. I'll have him on the line in 5 minutes. Thank you, I said. And Di? Yes? Book me a blowout at the best salon in Las Vegas. Whatever hotel it's in doesn't matter. I need an appointment for... I checked the time, calculated the flight. 4 o'clock this afternoon. A beat. Of course, she said, and I could hear the smile at the edges of her professionalism. Have a good flight, Claire. I stood up from the gray terminal chair and straightened my sweater. Outside, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Columbus skyline sat flat and familiar under an October sky. In 9 hours, Mark Calloway would be stepping off a chartered plane into the Vegas sun, card in hand, ready to check into a suite he had no idea he no longer had access to. The car my father had sent was waiting at the curb when I walked outside. Black. Quiet. Completely unremarkable to anyone who didn't know what it meant. I put my carry-on in the trunk and got in the back seat and didn't look back at the terminal. The Whitmore Aviation private terminal in Columbus is not the kind of place that ends up in travel articles. It doesn't need to be. It exists for a very specific clientele. People for whom efficiency and discretion are worth more than visibility. People who do not need to be impressed. People who have long since stopped using airports as an opportunity to perform their own status. I had been coming to this terminal since I was 7 years old. The attendant at the door, a young man named Gregory, who had been with us for 3 years, took my bag with a smile and no questions. The lounge inside was quiet. Cream walls, low lighting, a coffee setup that used beans from a farm we had a long-standing relationship with in Costa Rica. A leather sofa the color of warm caramel. Fresh flowers changed daily. I sat and had a cup of coffee while Captain Torres filed the flight plan. Captain Elena Torres had been flying for Whitmore Aviation for 11 years. She was precise, calm, and had a sense of humor that emerged exactly when you needed it and disappeared when the situation required focus. She came to find me in the lounge before we boarded. Las Vegas, McCarran Private, she said. Wheels up in 20 minutes. Flight time approximately 3 hours and 15. Perfect, I said. She looked at me for a moment with the comfortable directness of someone who has flown you through turbulence in both the literal and figurative sense. You doing okay? Getting there, I said. She nodded once, with the economy of expression I always appreciated in her. Coffee's better up here anyway, she said, tilting her head toward the aircraft. I'll see you on board. I want to describe that flight to you. I want to describe it because it was the first time in a very long time that I was fully, completely, unambiguously myself. And I want you to understand what that felt like after 2 years of careful smallness. The Gulfstream G55, that makes up tail number 7 of the Whitmore fleet, is configured for 12 passengers, though I flew alone that morning with just the crew. The cabin has 6 facing seats in Italian leather, the color of antique ivory, a 4-person conference area at the rear, a small galley, and a private rest suite behind a folding partition. The windows are large, disproportionately large for an aircraft, the kind of windows that make the sky feel accessible rather than remote. I settled into the window seat as we taxied, buckled in out of habit, though the seatbelt in this plane is nothing like the thin nylon strap of commercial aviation. It's soft, substantial, built for comfort without sacrificing function. Wheels up at 10:43 in the morning. The sensation of takeoff in a private aircraft is different from commercial. It's quieter, for one. The engines are present, but not intrusive. A low, continuous note, rather than a roar. The acceleration is smooth and immediate. No waiting in a queue of 40 other planes. No announcement about turning off your electronic devices. You go from standing still to airborne in what feels like a single continuous movement, like a sentence with no commas. When we leveled out at 41,000 feet and the seatbelt sign went dark, I asked the flight attendant, a young woman named Petra, who was based out of our East Coast operations, for a sparkling water and the fruit plate, and I opened my laptop. James Kowalski, the general manager of the Meridian Las Vegas, had sent me an email at 10:52, 10 minutes after Diana's call. Ms. Whitmore, it began. It is an honor and a privilege. Please find attached a summary of the current reservations under the names you specified. I have also taken the liberty of preparing the presidential suite. We held it available as per standing instructions from Whitmore Holdings. I look forward to welcoming you personally. Any requests you have will be handled with complete discretion. I read the attachment. The Calloway party had booked a 5-bedroom luxury suite on the 34th floor. 4 nights. The reservation was held with, and here's where it gets clarifying, a Whitmore Consulting Group corporate card, one of the 5 I had suspended 40 minutes earlier. They'd also booked VIP table service for 3 of the 4 nights, a private pool cabana for Saturday, and a tea time at the resort's partner golf club for Sunday morning. All of it, every single booking, held with cards that were, as of 10:54 that morning, suspended. I set the laptop on the tray table beside my water glass and looked out the window at the country moving below me. Somewhere down there, in the geometry of farms and highways and small towns, a chartered plane carrying 10 men and the fiction of Mark Calloway's wealth was crossing the same sky. I thought about the terminal, the way he'd turned back to look at me, just once, to make sure I wasn't going to be a problem. I thought about Patricia Calloway saying "Claire, dear" in that tone. I thought about Tate's "oh," just that. Just "oh." I thought about 2 years of paying for things quietly, of making his life possible through a series of careful, loving, invisible interventions, of shrinking myself to fit inside the story he needed to be true. Then I picked up my phone and called Marcus. "Claire," he said warmly. Marcus has worked in luxury hospitality for 20 years and has the rare quality of making you feel genuinely welcome without making it feel performative. "I've spoken to James. Everything is arranged." "Thank you," I said. "I want to walk you through something." "Of course." "The Calloway reservation," I said. "When they arrive at check-in, I'd like the front desk to process the card normally. Let it decline naturally. Don't pre-warn anyone. Just let the process happen." A brief silence. Marcus is a professional, and professionals do not editorialize. "Understood," he said. "Then I'd like them to be informed that the reservation has been flagged due to payment issues, and that they'll need to provide an alternative card. If they request a manager, the manager on duty should be fully briefed and should handle it calmly and privately." "Very good. And Marcus, I'll be checking in around 3 o'clock. I'd like to be in a suite before they arrive." "You will be," he said. "Is there anything you'd like prepared?" I thought for a moment. "Champagne," I said. "The good one. And flowers. Something architectural, not fussy. And make sure the balcony is set up. I want to be able to see the whole strip." "Done," he said. "Claire, it's genuinely lovely to have you with us." "Thank you, Marcus," I said. "It's been a while." I hung up and leaned back in the cream leather seat and closed my eyes for a moment. Outside, the sky was the particular blue of high altitude, thin and pure and completely indifferent to everything happening below it. At 41,000 feet, there are no terminals. There are no chartered planes full of laughing men. There is just the clean geometry of the horizon and the sound of engines doing exactly what they were built to do. I slept for an hour. When I woke up, we were crossing into Nevada. I freshened up in the aircraft's lavatory, a detail that always surprises people who haven't flown privately, that the lavatory exists and is functional and does not require you to perform contortionist yoga to use it. I changed into the outfit I'd packed with what I now recognized was deliberate foresight: a silk blouse the color of champagne, tailored dark trousers, heels. Simple jewelry. My engagement ring. I looked at that ring for a long moment in the mirror. Then I put it in my carry-on bag. Not out of anger. Not yet. Out of clarity. I wanted to walk into the Meridian as Claire Whitmore, completely, unapologetically, without the ring Mark had given me when he thought I was someone he'd condescended to love. Whatever happened next, I wanted it to happen without that symbol complicating the picture. We began our descent at 1:57 in the afternoon. The Las Vegas Valley from above is its own kind of spectacle, the city appearing suddenly out of absolute desert. The strip a ribbon of glass and light even in the afternoon sun. The mountains ringing the basin like something permanent, watching something temporary. I've flown into this city a dozen times, and it never entirely loses its drama. We touched down at 2:18 and taxied to the private terminal at the north end of the field. A car was waiting on the tarmac, If you've ever had to make yourself smaller to make someone else feel bigger, and you know exactly what I mean, this is your community. Subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell me your story. Because the stories we think no one wants to hear are usually the ones that matter most. The Meridian Las Vegas had opened 14 months earlier, to the kind of reviews that make other hotels quietly reconsider their life choices. It occupied a prime location on the northern section of the Strip, 42 stories of glass and steel, designed by an architectural firm whose other projects included a museum in Helsinki and a concert hall in Abu Dhabi. The interiors had been done by a French designer who had described his vision in a profile piece I had read on the plane as the feeling of having arrived somewhere that has been waiting for you. He wasn't wrong. The lobby was high-ceilinged and serene in a way that felt engineered without being false. Natural stone floors in a pale gray that caught the afternoon light through the floor-to-ceiling windows. A water feature, not a fountain, something more subtle. A long channel of water that ran the length of one wall and made a sound like thinking. Flowers everywhere, but not hotel lobby flowers. Arrangements that looked like they'd been considered, that had aesthetic opinions. The staff at the front desk looked up when I walked in. Not with the particular alert attention of people recognizing a celebrity, but with the practiced warmth of people who had been briefed. James Kowalski himself was waiting. He was a trim, silver-haired man in his 50s, with the kind of contained energy that years in luxury hospitality produce. Always present, never hovering. He extended his hand with a smile that was professional without being performative. "Ms. Whitmore," he said, "welcome to the Meridian. We're very honored." "Thank you, James," I said. "It's a beautiful property. We hope it lives up to your family's standards." He said this with precisely the right amount of humor, acknowledging that the Whitmore name carried weight without being obsequious about it. He walked me to the presidential suite personally. The suite occupied the entire northeast corner of the 38th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 walls. A living area larger than most people's apartments. A kitchen I would not use, but appreciated the existence of. A primary bedroom with a bed that appeared to have been designed for the express purpose of changing your opinion of sleep. A bathroom with a soaking tub positioned so that you could see the mountains while you were in it. And the balcony. The balcony ran the full length of the corner, with a view that on one side faced the Strip, and on the other faced the desert. It was furnished with deep outdoor seating, a table, and 2 loungers. Someone had already set up the champagne, Krug, 2012 in a standing ice bucket, and the flowers. Tall, sculptural arrangements in a dark vase, white and cream, and the palest sage. I stepped outside and looked at Las Vegas spread below me in the late afternoon sun. I poured a glass of champagne. I stood there for a long time. Mark's chartered flight landed at 4:47. I know this because Diana had, at my request, set up a simple alert. Nothing invasive, nothing she hadn't done before for legitimate business purposes. Just a notification tied to the tail number of the charter company's aircraft. When it touched down, my phone buzzed quietly on the balcony table. I freshened my champagne. The drive from the airport to the Meridian, with Strip traffic on a Friday evening, would take between 25 and 40 minutes, which meant they would arrive at check-in somewhere between 5:15 and 5:30. I did the math and went inside to let Diana know I was settled, replied to 3 emails, and then returned to the balcony. At 5:22, I received a text from Marcus. "They've arrived at the front desk." I stood up. I want to be careful here about how I describe what happened next, because I think it's important to be accurate. This was not a scene I staged for cruelty. I hadn't arranged an audience. I hadn't told the front desk staff to be anything other than professional. What happened at that check-in desk happened because reality, which had been deferred for a very long time, finally arrived on schedule. I took the elevator down, not to the lobby, to the mezzanine level, which overlooks the main floor through a glass railing. A comfortable, unremarkable viewing point. A place where you might stand to wait for someone, or to look at a water feature, or to simply exist in a beautiful hotel. I stood at the railing and looked down. I saw them before they saw me. 10 men clustered around the front desk. Mark at the front, card in hand. The posture of a man accustomed to his transactions being processed without friction. Tate beside him, Brandon slightly behind. The others fanning out in the particular formation of people who've arrived somewhere they want to be seen arriving. The front desk agent, a young woman whose composure I quietly admired throughout the entire exchange, was processing the card with the professional expression of someone who has delivered difficult news before and understands that the news is not personal. I watched her run it. I watched her face remain completely neutral. I watched her lean forward slightly and say something to Mark that I was too high to hear. I watched Mark's expression change. Not dramatically. Not at first. The first change was a small thing, a slight tightening around the eyes, the look of someone who has encountered an unexpected obstacle and is already composing the reasonable explanation. He said something. She said something. He handed her another card. This second card, which I recognized from the description Diana had given me, was one of the MCK Enterprises LLC cards, suspended as of 10:54 that morning. She ran it, the same neutral expression, Mark's jaw set. Tate stepped forward. Brandon appeared at Mark's shoulder. I saw Mark's hands move, the gestures of someone providing context, explaining, insisting on the reasonableness of the situation. The front desk agent nodded with professional patience and picked up a phone. The manager on duty arrived, a young man in a dark suit whose posture was that of someone who has been fully briefed and intends to handle this situation correctly. I watched him have a quiet, focused conversation with Mark. I watched Mark's face move through confusion and into something that I recognized, with a clarity that surprised me, as the specific expression of a man whose story about himself is starting to unravel. His friends were watching now. The easy, celebratory energy of arrival had stalled completely. Chaser said something to Davis. Davis looked at his phone. Tate's arms crossed over his chest in a posture that I read, from the mezzanine, as the beginning of social distance. Mark raised his voice slightly. I couldn't hear the words. I didn't need to. I could hear the shape of them, the assertion of identity, of right, of entitlement to a smoothly running transaction. I could hear the particular frequency of a man who has always had a card that works and does not have a framework for what it means when it doesn't. And it was in that moment, watching him from the mezzanine of a hotel I had quietly made possible, that I finally understood the full weight of what I had been carrying. Not just the money, not just the subsidies and the covered bills and the mortgage restructuring and the credit cards and the $14,000 engagement party. The weight of the story I had let him tell. The weight of having let someone build their confidence, their social standing, their entire sense of what they were capable of on a foundation I had built and he had never known about. The weight of having loved someone generously while they loved me conditionally. Take a bus home. He had said that to me in a public airport in front of his friends. I straightened my shoulders, and I took the elevator down to the lobby. He saw me before I reached the front desk. I was perhaps 20 feet away when it happened. Some movement at the edge of his peripheral vision, some quality of purposeful approach, and he turned, and his face went through 4 distinct expressions in approximately 2 seconds. The first was recognition. The second was confusion. The third was something that might have been relief, a quick flash of it, the instinctive response of someone who believes that the person they know has arrived to fix the problem. The fourth expression, when he took in the suite key card in my hand, the way the hotel staff were oriented toward me, the particular quality of my stillness, the champagne-colored blouse, the fact that I was clearly a guest rather than a visitor. The fourth expression was something I had never seen on his face before. It was the beginning of understanding. "Claire," he said, and my name in his voice had a new quality, a question in it, an uncertainty. "Mark," I said. I watched his eyes move around me, to the manager, who was standing nearby with the posture of someone prepared for however this conversation needed to go, to James Kowalski, who had appeared from somewhere and was standing near the concierge desk with the quiet authority of a man on his own territory, to the front desk agent, who was doing the professional thing and looking at her computer screen. "What are you? How are you?" He stopped, started again. "Is something wrong with the reservation? Do you know something about the—" "I know everything about the reservation," I said simply. He stared at me. Behind him, Tate had gone very still. Brandon's arms were at his sides. The loose, celebratory formation of 10 men on a bachelor trip had contracted into something quieter and more attentive. "The cards," Mark said slowly. "The Whitmore Consulting Group cards. They were declined." "Yes," I said. "There must be some kind of error." "There isn't," I said. He looked at me for a long moment, and I watched the calculation happening in real time, watched him moving through the terrain of what he knew, reassembling facts into a shape that might make sense. The cards were under Whitmore Consulting Group. Claire's dad worked in something called aviation. The hotel seemed to know her. The manager was treating her like someone important. Her name was Whitmore. "Claire," he said, very carefully. "What's Whitmore Consulting Group?" "One of my father's holding companies," I said. He blinked. "Your father's?" "My family's," I said. "We have several." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Tate made a sound, not words, just a sound. The involuntary verbal noise of a man whose understanding of a situation has just shifted fundamentally. Brandon said, "Wait. The cards you've been using for the past 14 months, I said, and I kept my voice measured, not unkind, but clear. The voice I use in board meetings, the voice I never used with Mark because I was too busy being the girl from Ohio. Our corporate accounts associated with Whitmore Holdings. My company. The reservations for this hotel were held on one of those accounts. The account has been suspended. The reservation stands, but it would need to be secured with an alternative payment method. Mark's mouth opened, closed. "You're not," he started. "You're not from—" "I'm from Connecticut," I said. "My father's company is based there. We have operations here in Nevada as well. We contract with 4 properties on the Strip, this one included." I could see him trying to find the solid ground of what he knew, finding it gone, reaching again. "The hardware store," he said, almost to himself. "I was in Columbus for a site visit," I said. "I was wearing something comfortable." "You said your dad worked in aviation?" "He does," I said. "He built Whitmore Aviation. It's valued, as of the last quarter, at approximately $2.3 billion. I'm the sole heir." I paused. "I wanted to be loved for who I was," I said, "not what I had. So I waited to see who you would be." The lobby of the Meridian was quiet in the way that very good hotels maintain. An ambient murmur. The water features soft sound. Music at a level designed to be felt rather than heard. But within the 12-foot radius of our small group, there was absolute silence. Mark looked like a man who had stepped onto an elevator and found the floor missing. "The bills," he said. "All those times that you—" "Yes," I said. "The renovation account you mentioned, covered by one of my accounts," I said. "Yes. The mortgage thing with my parents' house. Restructured through a Whitmore subsidiary," I said. "Your parents still own the house because of a transaction they attributed to a favorable market shift. It wasn't the market." He was very still. "The engagement party," he said. $14,000, $1,200 of which went to a florist Patricia chose, and then complained about for 3 weeks. Something moved through his face that I didn't want to catalog too closely. Not because I felt bad. I had moved past that somewhere over the Nevada desert at 41,000 feet. But because some things, even in their deserving, are not entirely comfortable to watch. "I told you to take a bus home," he said, quietly, like he was hearing the words again for the first time. "You did," I said. "I said you weren't used to this level of—" "You did," I said again. Tate looked at the floor. Brandon had both hands in his pockets. Mark looked at me for a long moment, with an expression that was too complicated to name, and I understood that somewhere inside that expression was a real person who had made choices he could not unmake, and that reality has a particular quality of weight that comes with no warning and no way to prepare. "Claire," he said, and my name in his voice had changed again. No longer a question, no longer the reflexive reach for someone who could fix the problem. It was something else. Something that had lost its certainty entirely. "I don't have the ring," I said quietly. "I took it off on the plane. I'll return it to you through my attorney. She'll be in touch on Monday." I paused. "I'd like you to enjoy your trip, Mark. I genuinely would. I think you should use the time to figure out who you actually are when no one's building the foundation for you." I looked at him steadily. "Because I'd like you to find that out. It's important. Just not with me." I turned to James Kowalski. "James," I said, "I'm going to go back upstairs. Could you have the kitchen send up whatever the chef is proudest of tonight? I feel like celebrating." "Of course, Ms. Whitmore," he said. "Right away." I walked back toward the elevator. I did not look back. Not because I wasn't tempted, but because I had learned, in the past several hours, something important about the particular power of forward motion. The elevator doors closed behind me. I exhaled. That night, I sat on the balcony of the presidential suite of the Meridian, Las Vegas, in a hotel robe that probably cost more than most people's rent, with a glass of champagne and a plate of food that a chef had prepared with care, and a view of the desert mountains going purple in the last of the evening light. And I thought about who I had been for the past 2 years. I had been so afraid of being loved for my money that I had allowed myself to be kept by someone who loved me for nothing at all. I had confused the absence of transaction with the presence of authenticity. I had made myself invisible to protect something that turned out not to be worth protecting. I had shrunk myself into a shape that fit inside his story, and in doing so, I had let his story become mine. The hardest part of the evening, and I want to be honest about this, because honesty is the only thing this story is worth. The hardest part wasn't the confrontation. It wasn't watching his face move through understanding. Those moments, though not easy, had a forward motion to them that carried you through. The hardest part was sitting on that balcony alone and understanding that I had participated in my own diminishment, that I had made choices out of longing and caution and a deep, somewhat irrational fear of the glass wall, that I had made choices that left me standing in a terminal being told to take a bus home. The lesson wasn't about revenge, though the precision of the circumstances had a certain satisfying completeness I won't pretend to be above. The lesson was about this: you cannot hide your worth in an attempt to be valued, because what you attract by hiding is not love for your true self. It is the specific, comfortable confidence of someone who believes they are doing you a favor by being with you. Mark Calloway was not a monster. He was a man who had been allowed to believe a story, and the story made him small in ways he probably didn't fully recognize until a Friday evening in a hotel lobby in Las Vegas, when the floor gave way and the story went with it. But I had helped write that story. That part is mine to own. Going forward, I decided, I would not do that again. Not with my money. Not with my name. Not with my actual self. The whole complicated, loving, occasionally reckless, Gulfstream flying, journal keeping, genuinely a person who had been performing Simple Girl from Ohio for 2 years, and done it so well she almost convinced herself. I finished my champagne. I ordered another plate of food. I called my father. "How are you doing, Claire Bear?" he said. "Honestly," I said. "Really, really well." He laughed. "The suite okay?" "The suite is extraordinary." "Good," he said. "And the other thing?" "Handled," I said. "Done." A pause. "I'm proud of you," he said. "For what it's worth." "It's worth a lot," I said. After I hung up, I sat with the quiet of the balcony and the lights of the city below and the mountains in the dark, and I stayed there for a long time, just breathing. Not thinking about Mark, not processing, just being in the clean, uncomplicated space of someone who has finally stopped pretending to be less than she is. The stars over the Nevada desert are something that surprises people. The way they appear when the light gets low enough, the density of them, the depth From a balcony on the 38th floor of a glass tower on the Las Vegas Strip, you wouldn't expect to be able to see them at all. But I could see them. I looked at them for a long time. If this story found you at a moment when you needed it, when you needed to hear that your worth is not determined by how well you've hidden it, that your kindness is not the same as your weakness, that the right person will choose you in the terminal and not just in the suite, then I want you to know this channel is built for you. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs it. We're just getting started. In the weeks that followed, the practical realities resolved themselves the way practical realities do, through attorneys and paperwork, and the particular quiet efficiency of disengaging two lives that had been more entangled than either party had fully accounted for. My attorney, a formidable woman named Grace Hartley, who had represented Whitmore Holdings for 12 years and took a specific kind of professional pleasure in this type of matter, handled the return of the ring, the dissolution of the engagement, and the gentle but complete extraction of Mark Calloway from any accounts, properties, or financial arrangements associated with me or my family. Mark didn't contest any of it. I hadn't expected him to. Whatever else that evening in the lobby had cost him, it had clarified something that I genuinely think, he may have needed to have clarified. Patricia Calloway called me once, 2 weeks later. "Claire, dear," she said in that voice. "Patricia," I said. "I think there may have been a misunderstanding," she said. "There wasn't," I said pleasantly, "but I appreciate the call." There was a pause. "Your father's company," she said carefully. "Whitmore Aviation. I've seen the name in the everywhere," I said. "Yes, it's a fairly recognizable name in the industry." Another pause. "Well," she said. And then, in a tone that contained something I might generously describe as recalibration, "Well, take care of yourself, Patricia," I said, and I meant it. Not warmly, exactly, but sincerely, because whatever performance her family had been maintaining for years, the Indian Hill House, the Lake Erie summers, the old money framing of a present that didn't match the past, that performance had its own weight, and I didn't need to add to it. I hung up and got back to work. Work was and remains the thing I love most fully and without complication. The operational reality of Whitmore Aviation, the complexity of running a fleet, the relationships with clients and crew, and the logistics of an industry that requires precision and trust. I'd been running the day-to-day operations of the company for 3 years, largely from the background, allowing my father the figurehead role he genuinely enjoyed, while I handled the substance. After Vegas, I stopped working from the background, not dramatically, not with any announcement. I simply stopped defaulting to invisibility. I took the meetings I'd been having my father front. I put my name on the correspondence I'd been sending through his office. I walked into rooms as myself and let the rooms adjust accordingly. They always did. Rooms adjust to reality when you give them the chance. The trouble is, most of us spend so long managing other people's comfort with our reality that we never find out. Tate, this is the last Tate story, I promise, reached out about 4 months later. A LinkedIn message, which felt appropriate. His firm had officially folded, and he was doing some kind of consultancy work that required him to think about aviation logistics. He wondered if I might be open to a conversation. I forwarded it to Diana with a single note. "No, thank you." She replied with a thumbs-up emoji, which was uncharacteristic of her and therefore perfect. As for Mark, here is what I will tell you, and I will tell you honestly because he deserves honesty even in the telling of a story he handled badly. Mark Calloway, from what I understand, through the particular osmosis of overlapping social circles, spent several months doing something he hadn't done before. He spent several months being honest about his situation. He sold the leased car and got something he could actually afford. He moved into a smaller apartment. He took a job that was below what he felt his identity should require of him, and he did it anyway. And by all accounts, he did it well. I don't know if he found out something important about himself in the process. I hope he did. I genuinely hope he did. Not because I want anything from that hope. Not reconciliation, not vindication, not an apology. Though the apology arrived in a letter about 6 months later, handwritten, which I read once and kept not out of sentimentality, but because it was honest. And honesty deserves acknowledgement. I hope he found something real to stand on, because the thing about building your confidence on someone else's silent generosity is that when it's withdrawn, you have nothing underneath. And that's a terrifying place to be. I know something about terrifying places. I spent 2 years in a different version of one. Here is the last thing I want to say. Never mistake someone's kindness for weakness. I know that sounds like a warning, and it is. But it's also something else. It's also an instruction for the person who is being kind. Your kindness is not weakness. Your patience is not passivity. Your choice to love quietly and generously and without keeping score is not evidence that you don't know your own value. It's evidence that you have enough value to share. But here is what I had to learn the hard way. Generosity without honesty is not generosity. It is a performance of generosity that ultimately serves no one. Not the person you're being generous with, not yourself. When I chose to hide what I was, I told myself I was protecting the relationship. I was actually protecting myself from the knowledge of what he would do if he knew the truth. I was deferring a test I was afraid of. And in deferring it, I let things build. The bills, the subsidies, the mortgage, the credit cards, the year and a half of quiet, invisible investment, until the gap between what was real and what Mark believed was so large that the truth, when it arrived, could only arrive as a rupture. I don't entirely regret the choice I made at the beginning. The desire to be loved plainly, to be chosen without the context of what I was worth. That desire was real, and it was human, and I stand by it. But I stayed too long. I let a test run past the point where the results were useful. The person who is right for you will choose you in the terminal. Not just in the suite. Not just when your name is on the reservation and the cards go through, and the view from the balcony is extraordinary. In the terminal, with your carry-on bag, when you're standing at the edge of a group where you clearly don't quite belong according to someone's invisible criteria. That's where love actually lives, in the choosing, specifically in the moments when the choosing requires something. I don't know who that person is for me. I haven't met them yet. Or I've met them, and the timing wasn't right. Or I've met them, and haven't recognized them, because I was too busy being the girl from Ohio in a denim jacket. Any of those things might be true. What I know is this: I will not perform small again. I will walk into rooms as myself, the full, actual, complicated, Gulf Stream owning, board meeting running, genuinely a person version of myself. And I will let people meet that version. And whoever chooses her, plainly, without calculation, without the careful recalibration that comes from finding out what she's worth, that person will have chosen something real, and so will I. Thank you for listening. If this story moved something in you, if it named something you've been carrying quietly, if it gave language to a feeling you've been trying to find words for, then I'm so glad you're here. This channel exists for the stories that don't always get told out loud. The stories of people who loved too generously, who waited too long, who finally decided that the version of themselves they'd been hiding was worth showing the world. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment. Tell me what this story meant to you, because your story matters here, every single one. And if you've been standing in someone's terminal, being told to take a bus home, sweetheart, you have a Gulf Stream. It's time to board.